Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar from Close Factor. We are very excited to welcome Michael Ferranti, CMO of Unleash, to join us on this webinar. And today's topic is ruthless prioritization that boosts marketing and sales synergy. Um, just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. Once you join, you may not be able to chat with each other, but you will certainly be able to post questions to any of the hosts or co-hosts in the chat. So please go ahead and do that. And the webinar is being recorded, and we will be emailing everybody a copy of the recording once we are done here. So thank you everyone and welcome. Let me introduce our esteemed guest today, Michael Ferranti. Michael leads marketing at Unleash, a software solution in the dev tool space used by enterprises such as Visa, Lloyds of London, Wayfair, and Samsung. And prior to Unleash, Michael was CMO at Teleport, an enterprise security solution, and he has had a storied career in software infrastructure and tooling with tours of duty previously at Portworx, Cluster HQ, and Rackspace. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks for having me. Very nice to be here, Lena.
And we're excited. We're as a customer of Close Factor, we see you almost all the time, but this is a privilege to have you talk to many of the folks in the sales tech and marketing tech space who want to know how to do better with go to market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just mention a two-time customer now. So been working with Close Factor for quite a while, and it certainly helps align sales and marketing. So looking forward to discussing that in more depth today.
We are too. For those who joined recently, our agenda today is we will be talking with Michael about what methods he's been using to synchronize marketing and sales objectives for amplified results. How has he been refining target strategies like ideal customer profile and driving team-wide execution? And what is the impact he's achieving with this type of strategic and focused marketing? Without further ado, let's dive into the very first question. Michael, often in many organizations, sales and marketing are at loggerheads with each other. How did you at Unleash plan your alignment of sales and marketing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first thing is really just having empathy for kind of your partner in crime on the other side. So I know on the call we've got some sales leaders and some marketing leaders. So in both cases, have empathy. My empathy comes from one of my favorite stories about my grandfather, who sold Singer sewing machines back in like the 1930s, door to door in New York City. And he was really good at it. And one of the things that he did, and I relate this to my SDR teams all the time, is he would kind of just walk up to an apartment and knock on the door, and they would say, "Who is it?" And he would say, "It's me." And they would inevitably open the door because it's me. It wasn't like, "It's the Singer sewing machine, man. Would you like to buy a Singer sewing machine?" And that natural ability with people, I think, is what great sales leaders do. And I always look for that in the people that I work with, and look for their strengths and realize that they're the ones that are going and knocking on the door, right? That have to face the rejection. That's not me, right? I get to sit behind my computer and put together decks, but the field, they're out and having those conversations and occasionally getting punched in the nose. So I start with from a place of empathy. The next thing is simply aligning on who the ideal customer is. Because 99% of problems that arise between sales and marketing, in my experience, come from a misalignment over who do we want meetings with. If you're really clear on that, clear on your ideal customer profile, then a lot of things disappear. Kind of this idea that, the common, it's almost a meme at this point, right? That these leads suck. Well, you're not working the leads right. And that back and forth, that happens, I think, when there's a misalignment between who the ideal customer is, because when you get that a meeting with a perfect account, you're much more, as a sales leader, you're much more likely to put the work into it, to make something happen, right? Not everybody's ready to make an order. Sometimes you have to sell. And it's much easier to bring yourself fully to that meeting when it's with the right account, when it's with the dream account. Um, and once you have that agreement, then organize your marketing efforts. And now I'm kind of speaking from the perspective of head of marketing. Organize your marketing efforts to when you have control, focus on those target accounts. You can't control who fills out your contact sales form, right? You can do some things to influence, but at the end of the day, right, if it's a student that wants a free trial, like you can't really control that. I believe without introducing a ton of friction into the process. But when you're doing outbound motions, when you're running ABM advertising campaigns, when you are picking topics for webinars that you're putting on, right? Do those things to attract that ideal customer profile. And that solves a lot of problems before they get started.
Those were awesome tips, and just to reiterate, the three main things that you talked about were: one, start with a place of empathy for each other. Second is align on the right set of accounts, the ICP, so to speak. And third is, from a marketing perspective, go after the same, when you're choosing the marketing activities, make sure that it is tailored to the ideal customer profile that both of you have aligned on,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
seems which seems very simple in theory, but there is a, I mean, if everybody just did that, would that solve the problem? What is exactly the ICP problem? Why is it so difficult?
Um, well, I think if everybody did this, it would solve the problem. The challenge is it takes a lot of courage to define an ICP. Because I'm of the sales and marketing school, or the go-to-market school, that every dollar is green. At the end of the day, we're business people, and this, being the CMO of a tech company, or VP of marketing, or VP of sales, except in a small number of instances, right? This isn't our personal project, right? This is a business, and we want to grow that business. And if we grow it with this type of customer, great. If we grow it with this type of customer, great. It's not a moral judgment. Your ICP is not a moral judgment. It's simply, where is the best alignment between our product and the needs of the market. And saying yes to an ICP means that you're saying no to other customer segments. And often, there's exceptions to everything that I'm going to say on this webinar. But generally speaking, if you have a customer segment, it's usually not like a 0 out of 10, and your ICP is a 10 out of 10. And it's like everything's a 0 or a 10. It's more like, well, this one is kind of like, there's some elements there could be a good fit, but they're a little bit too small. Or you know, everything is great in terms of company size, but like this technology that they're using, we don't have a great integration there, so that's not ICP. There's a lot of gray area. And when you really focus on ICP, that takes a lot of courage, because you end up saying no to a lot of things. And what you want is, by saying no, you can focus on the right things and drive more success there. But especially when you are either kind of new in your career, or newer in your career, or joining an organization where you can potentially, where the stakes are pretty high. Saying no to things, especially if your CEO comes to you and says, "Hey, we should do this." And you're like, "Okay, like, in the grand scheme of things, that whatever this is it's not a bad idea. It didn't come out of left field, but it doesn't really align with our ICP." You need to have courage to say, I'm not prioritizing that right now. It's not that it's a bad idea. It's just, it's not as good an idea as these other things that are more aligned with our ICP. Um, the the next thing, I think, is really figuring out, how do you operationalize the ICP in a way that gets everybody to agree that this set of accounts are the accounts that we're going after. When we can choose who to outbound to, who to run targeted ads against, who to target customer case studies with, that these are the right accounts. Um, and, I think there's been an evolution in how you do that. When many of us on the call started our careers, it was like, firmographic and technographic attributes or industry verticals, right? We really go after healthcare, we go after financial services or companies with more than 3,000 employees, or, technographic, we started to be able to use different browser extensions to figure out like, what technologies are these teams using. And then like LinkedIn made it even easier to kind of figure out, where the expertise lies within those accounts. Um, but now that even more data is available, you start to get into much more complex kind of interactions between firmographic and technographic, where within our own ICP at Unleash, we have about 12 factors that include things that are a little bit more complex, like has multiple business units or has a central product organization, and figuring out ways to concretely operationalize that in a way that everybody can agree on is quite a challenge. I think narrowing down to an ICP that you believe is the right one, that's challenge number one. Number two is operationalizing that definition, because everybody could sit around a table and agree, yeah, we're going after the enterprise. It's like, and you come to the table with like, okay, when we say enterprise, this is what we mean. And then or people are like, well, like, no, I don't, that's not the enterprise, or that's, it's too narrow, or that's too broad. That's the second piece that you need to figure out. And then the third is like aligning your activities around going after that ICP and picking the right activities. Um,
That
the
that's
one
a
thing
Go ahead.
uh, that I wanted to mention is kind of ICP definition is, as the first thing that I mentioned, is really, really critical. And it's okay that it looks a different way based on the size or really the stage of the company. So where you are in that product market fit journey. When you are very early on, prior to product market fit, your ICP is really a hypothesis that you're going and testing every single day. Um, as you grow, eventually, you want it to be much more data driven, where you're actually looking at your closed won opportunities, or if you are kind of a PLG type company, customers that actually have signed up and have, activated, or whatever metric you use for, this is a real customer that I believe we can grow with. You want to look at kind of on a grid, you want to imagine a distribution of different company sizes, different industries, whatever that metric is, and look at places where you see pockets of larger than average deal size and shorter than average time to revenue. And that could be from a sales led motion, right? How long does it, what's the velocity of the deal cycle, or from a customer like a PLG perspective, it could be how quickly they're signing up or how quickly they're activating. In those pockets where you see higher than average deal size and shorter than average time to close, that's an area to focus on. That becomes your ICP. And so you kind of have these two different approaches, and be confident based on where you are to pick the right one. Because there's nothing worse than trying to apply a data-driven decision to like a small data set. Humans are probably better at um, I guess interpreting when n is small, you're better using your own judgment than to try to do advanced statistics on very, very small data sets. But when you have a large data set, definitely take advantage of the tooling. And I've been through both of those processes with closed factor, and we can get into like how we did it in my last company, where it was much later stage, versus how I'm doing it now, where we're earlier stage. But the intention is that evolves over time. You don't just pick one.
Those are some great points. Love how you said that the ICP is not a moral judgment, but really the best alignment between your company's interests and your prospective customers' interests. It was a really great statement, and also love your, depending on the stage of the company, determine whether it's a hypothesis with a small data set or whether it's, like a revenue, a higher velocity to revenue type of methodology that you're following to determine your ICP. Awesome. So presuming, and you mentioned you use 12 factors at Unleash to determine your ICP and figure out, is this ICP big enough for us to go after, which is also I'm expecting a criterion you applied. Once you did that, what were some strategies that you used for team-wide execution?
Um, so I think the first is that ICP definition itself is a process. So that started at the board level at Unleash, where we really brought in our founders, our executive team, our board members to have a discussion about, in the early stages of this company, what do we believe the right market is? How do we differentiate against our competitors who might have a similar product but go after a different segment? So that there was high level executive alignment and board alignment that this was the right path. Um, then, um, again, we drove agreement on the operationalization of the ICP. I joined at a time where we already had for the purpose of this conversation, let's just say we go after enterprises. And again, we have like 12 factors that define what an enterprise means to us based on kind of how strong a fit they are for our platform. Um, and I came in at a time where we had that hypothesis, but we hadn't yet operationalized it. So I in some of the earliest meetings that I had with our founders and the rest of the executive team, in particular our VP of sales, we kind of went line by line on operationalization and said, okay, when we say multiple business units, when we say, advanced DevOps practitioner, right? These are things that are easy to say in a conversation around a table and everybody nods their head. But when it actually comes down to, okay, how do you look at a LinkedIn profile and tell whether or not this is an advanced DevOps organization or not? That's what operationalization means. We just went attribute by attribute and explored, okay, if they have this, do we think that's sufficient, right? Is it necessary? And drove alignment on the operationalization. Once we operationalized, then we took all of our accounts that met those criteria and we ranked them based on a score. So we use good, better, best. And then we have a fourth category that we introduced subsequently called growth, where it's someone that kind of just misses the cutoff, but like still, again, in the relatively early stages, we don't want to say no to too many things at the risk of maybe not finding that future ICP
Mm-hmm.
that does close a lot faster at larger deal sizes. So we have this fourth category that we call growth. And we stack ranked all of our accounts into those categories so that we could, one, over time, in theory, we should have more success with best accounts than with better accounts and more success with better than good. That
Mm-hmm.
helps us refine the stack rank model. But it also enabled prioritization, especially on the outbound side with our SDR team. So each SDR has about 150 accounts that they go after. That's a large number, but it's not huge, just in the grand scheme of things. But again, we are an enterprise software company. So if you think about like, the Fortune 2000, those are all enterprise customers. Well, there are only 2,000 of them, right? You do the math and you can get to an SDR team of modest size that would be
Mm-hmm.
going after a set of accounts similar to that. Um, but still on any given day, you have to figure out, do I reach out to, Bank of America or do I reach out to, I don't know, Coca-Cola? And the ranking gives you that first order prioritization, which is really important because my view of outbound is personalization is key. There's kind of a like anything you say around this, like there are like flame wars on LinkedIn all the time about this, like how important is personalization, how important is volume. Both are important, but outbound is not email marketing. And so email marketing is very, very little personalization. Um, and then you kind of the opposite end of the spectrum is completely custom work, right? SDRs are somewhere in the middle. Still a volume play, but it's not simply the same email sent out to everybody. And so they need to be able to prioritize their time because they can't on any given day. My SDR team, this is maybe getting into too much detail, but hopefully it'll just illustrate the point of why prioritization is important. They are reaching out to about 30 prospects a day, net new, in addition to following up with existing conversations. You know, if someone accepts your LinkedIn a connection request and you're having a conversation there, you have internal team training, all these things, about 30 net new a day. That's not a lot of people when you imagine that these are enterprise accounts. They probably have on average 500 to 5,000 developers, or people in the engineering organization. That's where we focus. So you come in on Monday, you better be going after the best possible accounts,
Mhm.
and the scoring really helps there. Um, there are two other things that I just want to that I wanted to mention. One is like make going after the ICP a team sport within your organization. Get everybody aligned on how awesome this worldview is, where everything that we do focuses on this ICP, because then everybody feels like they have ownership of it and are contributing to it. And that doesn't just mean sales and marketing. It also means like product development. Get your engineers excited about, you know, solving problems for these people that work at these types of companies,
Mhm.
because it's this uh, kind of snowball effect
Mhm.
where your product itself gets better and better for the ICP that you're going after. One of the things that we did, actually, we did it at Teleport, and then we also did it here at Unleash, is give the ICP just kind of like a unique name. Here at Unleash, we talk about it in terms of the UPP, or the Unleash Perfect Profile. It's just a little bit of branding that we say UPP all the time, and people understand what that means. And they get behind it. And it's not just a marketing strategy, it's also a sales strategy, it's also a product development strategy, customer success, right? Everything that we do as an organization is aligned to this UPP, which is our kind of special name for the ICP. Gets everybody involved. And then just communication, repetition all the time, communicating to people every time a deal, for instance, pops up in HubSpot. We use HubSpot as our CRM, pops up in HubSpot, new contact us request, right? That UPP company score or that ICP company score is showing up. You know, we just got just this week, two Fortune 100s have come in so far, and UPP company score best gets people really excited that we're seeing not just from an outbound perspective, but also from an inbound perspective, an increase in volume coming from these ICP accounts. When I do our weekly all hands, I'm talking about what percentage of our pipeline is coming from these UPP accounts, you know, before we implemented it and after we implemented it. So people are seeing the momentum.
Amazing.
Reiterating when we have win wires that are going out, talking about that this was a UPP good account or a UPP better account, just so that people hear it over and over and then begin to um, really understand it and see how they can contribute to it themselves. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of a starter for how we.
Yeah, yeah. I love UPP. I'm gonna make a close factor perfect profile as well based on that as CPP. Uh, thank you for those tips. So just to reiterate what you mentioned, one is get everybody on board, right from the board members, executives onwards, all the way down to the people in the field, the BDRs, the AEs, everybody aligned around what makes this customer profile the best, how should you look for it, use the factors to rank and score accounts so that they know that they're always going after the best possible prospects on any given day, and even align your product strategy around catering to these exactly right fit customers so that there is a snowball effect. And
Yeah.
then I absolutely loved the branding idea of the UPP, which just gives that extra pizzazz to all deals closed within UPP versus non-UPP. How did that change over time? All that. Amazing. These tips are likely to be super, super useful. How does this translate to day-to-day execution for your team?
Um, yeah, great question. It's really the lifeblood of everything we do. I think without a crystal clear notion of who our ICP is, I know I would personally be spinning my wheels every day, and the rest of the team would as well. So this is a little bit like asking, a fish, what it, does water feel wet? It's like I only know that, so it's hard for me to answer if it's wet or not. But I'll try. I think the first place where the ICP strategy really comes in and is essential is in our outbound program. As I mentioned, every SDR when they come in gets about 150 accounts that have been assigned, that are assigned, and they get a mix of good, better, and best accounts. And they use close factor to prioritize the contacts within each of those accounts. So they first use we use close factor to score the accounts. So we know that, this stack rank order. Then within each of those accounts, we're using close factor to figure out which of those 5,000 engineers to reach out to today, right? Who is most likely to be receptive to our message. Um, and we're actually starting to do some account research now as well, and close factors using the deep dives, and have explored the smart send as well to do the email personalization. So yeah, I think you call it the go-to-market operating system. And I've adopted that terminology internally as well when I talked about kind of why we needed this platform as part of our ICP motion. It really is kind of it's at that key operationalization layer. So they will they have prioritization of accounts, prioritization of contacts within those accounts, and then it's kind of the I think BDR playbook or SDR playbook that would be pretty familiar. We're doing kind of multi-channel, phone, LinkedIn, email. The second area that the ICP becomes really important is all of our ABM advertising. So we basically create audiences based on the prioritized contacts and prioritized accounts that we get through Close Factor. So I think right now we have an audience of maybe like 50,000 or so, kind of, directors of engineering, VPs of engineering, directors of DevOps, software architects, like across those types of categories at companies that fit our UPP criteria. And then that becomes we have kind of top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel advertising that we're doing mainly through LinkedIn right now. We ran some experiments with other paid advertising channels, Google search, for instance. It really didn't work for us. But we found that we can get kind of leads at relatively low cost per lead through LinkedIn advertising, mainly top of the funnel stuff, which is always a little bit of a gamble. But the reason we think it'll pay off for us is because the audience that we're going after is really aligned with our ICP. It's not like we're doing kind of top of the funnel stuff and just like create awareness and eventually some of that will trickle down into business. We're really being really, really focused with our dollars. So it's very easy for me to defend, both from a budgetary perspective, but then also from a kind of a opportunity cost perspective of if we're focused on optimizing these campaigns, we're not doing these other things. I sleep better at night knowing that we're running these experiments. We don't know if this is a good channel for us, but it's something that we're creating visibility with ultimately the exact same people that my SDR team is reaching out to on a daily basis. And so, there's some dark funnel stuff that's happening, I'm sure, where some of the outbound meetings that we're booking have been influenced by our marketing campaigns, even if I can't prove that. The third piece is we do a lot of, as most companies do right now, a lot of content marketing. For us, it's technical content marketing, but we align that to the ICP as well. So, for instance, we go after enterprises, and there are probably 15 different companies you can go and buy a feature flag from. But Unleash is the best company for really, really large enterprises, where you have 5,000 developers, where you have like just massive security and compliance constraints that limit your flexibility in different software development practices. We kind of give developers a tool that they love, and we give the security and compliance teams within those organizations, right, the controls that they need in order to not have the idea that you could turn something off and on in production, which is essentially what a feature flag does. Like, and not have that sound like a terrible, terrible thing that you would want to avoid, right? So that's how we do it. Um, and so we've done content marketing that really our starting point is not here's how a feature flag works, because there's already tons of content on the market about that. Our starting point is you need to implement feature flags at an organization where the default position of the security team is don't give access to people. And how do you do it then? So it's much more tailored to our ICP. And one of the inbounds that I mentioned, the Fortune 500 from this week, actually came from finding this piece of content. So really, really good alignment. We've been outbounding that company. We did technical marketing, and they eventually came inbound. We've also been doing the account-based marketing to them via LinkedIn, and they ultimately came inbound based on a piece of content that we put together. So it's like all of the arrows in our quiver are pointed in the same direction. And sometimes, outbound gets the win, sometimes inbound gets the win. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because all we care about is growing the number of conversations that we're having with these accounts so that we can close more revenue. Um, and then the fourth thing I'll mention is just from a sales perspective, making sure that sales is aligned as we do all of this. So when we're booking meetings with the ICP, we're going to sales and we're trying to understand, okay, are these still the right meetings? Are we having success here? Are we, there's kind of that range. You've got like the biggest of the big companies in enterprise and the ones that almost don't hit the cutoff, right? How is it going with those? Do you want to only see the big ones? Do you want to only see the small ones? And just make sure that they have an ongoing part of they're an ongoing seat at the table to make sure that we're refining over time. And I think probably within another 2 quarters, we'll probably revamp our scoring entirely
Mm-hmm.
based on the data that we've accumulated in the last year. And that'll be another opportunity to have people at the seat at the table to define the next 12 months of our ICP outbound.
Amazing stuff. I think this is incredibly sophisticated, probably more sophisticated than we've seen at many of our other customers. So, congratulations on putting this motion in place. I will say I loved what you said about surround sound marketing, all your arrows pointed at the same target, and that then flips that target to come inbound. So, amazing work there. Um, one quick question for you. You mentioned you're using certain tech to help you execute smoothly. What if you were to think from like some new CMO at a new company perspective, what would your recommendations be? What will help you execute smoothly with defining the ICP, then making sure both content, marketing, outbound programs, sales are aligned to that ICP?
Um, so I mean, not surprisingly, since I'm on the webinar with you today, like I'm a big believer in close factors' ability to provide that alignment. Um, because at the end of the day, it's there's an old quote that I don't know if it's accurate or not, or just sounded good on LinkedIn. But in military academies, first year students study strategy, second year students study tactics, and then third year students study logistics. Like you win wars with logistics, absolutely, and you win markets with logistics. It's the operationalization of these concepts. Strategy is a dime a dozen, right? Lots of smart people have good strategies, but can you come in every single day and execute in the way that you need in order to drive results over the long term? That's really what sets apart winning teams from everybody else. So I'm trying to build a winning team, and especially on the outbound side, it's a really, really hard job. Like an SDR is, man, you're getting rejections all day long, sometimes not very politely. And it's really, really important for me that that team understands that, like, I know today is hard, the way training for a marathon is hard, right? You go out for a long run and it's like, man, that sucks. It's like, okay, but you have your training plan. If you just do these things, you're going to be successful over time because it's about the accumulation of work over a long period of time. It's not like magical moments that lead to success. It's an accumulation of work over a long-term period of time. So what Close Factor does for us is provides a very transparent way of saying, okay, these are the accounts that we're going after. This is why we're going after them, right? Based on these attributes. And if these aren't the right attributes, let's pick other attributes. Like it's not, again, it's not a religious debate. It's not a moral judgment. It's just to say, okay, if we look at a LinkedIn account, right, these are the things we look for to say, yes, we should talk to this person or not. So we define that. It's very, very transparent. It's not a black box. Everybody can contribute who wants to contribute. Then it's like, okay, now we know which accounts to go after. Great, we have 1,500 accounts or 2,000 accounts. What should I do today? If I'm building out an SDR team from scratch, right? I'm not going to assign 1,500 accounts to one person, right? I have to assign them 150 accounts or 100 accounts. Well, which ones do I pick, right? Again, there's prioritization there. Then it's like, okay, now I have 150 accounts. Who do I reach out to today? What's the first one? Well, this one. Okay, great. 5,000 developers within that account. What's the first email that I sent? Okay, this person. So it's just at every step of the way, there's prioritization that helps drive focus and removes kind of churn of like almost like analysis paralysis, or where do I start? Or it's like, this is overwhelming. How am I going to book, 25 meetings this quarter from these accounts? I don't even know where to start. It's like, just start here, run the playbook, run the process, and you're going to see results. Then like that was a very outbound focused, but I'm also doing it when it comes to our ABM approach to paid advertising, right? I have a couple of different ways I'm using it. One is like to very specific people within very specific accounts. Another is to kind of within LinkedIn title match, but from our UPP accounts to see which is better and which is working. But it's all about that prioritization. Um, and yeah, and then the last piece would just be the communication ongoing of how things are going. I have a board meeting actually. As soon as I get off of this, I'm going to go into the board. And I was actually talking to my SDR leader earlier today, and at the end of our one-on-one, he was like, "Yeah," I was like, "Hey, I have a board meeting later tonight. I'll let you know how it goes tomorrow." And he's like, and I was like, and I'm not nervous at all because we had a great quarter, our best quarter ever. And he's like, I know you're not worried because you didn't tell me about the board meeting until just now. And usually if things are bad, right, I'm going and I'm pulling extra data and like trying to come up with a positive spin on it. And yeah, I didn't have to do any of that because every single day we're managing a little bit. We're steering the ship. And as a for instance, one of the things that I'm presenting in the board meeting is when I started, about 90% of our outbound accounts, and it wasn't that many because we didn't have a very well developed outbound motion, but about 90% of our accounts were from non-UPP customers. Fast forward to today, 90% of our outbound is from UPP customers. So we've completely flipped the ratio. And our pipeline is through the roof. Not surprisingly, because when you're in enterprise software, right, when you're bringing an enterprise software offering to an actual enterprise, they end up nodding their head a lot more frequently when you're trying to sell that to someone that's just not set up to procure software at that level, right? It doesn't matter how good you are. They're just there. They get sticker shock when you see how much it is. But if you're selling to a Fortune 2000, right, you're probably just a tiny bit of what their AWS spend is alone. Um, so let me stop there and see if you have any questions, Lena.
No,
But
this
that's kind of about
that's
the
those are great pointers. I love how you flipped both your outbound motion from being general to very, very specific, and the change is very dramatic. And I'm sure it'll make for some great statistics to show to your board. That was awesome. Now, this is obviously not your first tour as CMO. You've done this before. I guess one question for you, just so the team understands, is what did you do differently this time than before? uh,
Yeah.
what
Great
was some,
question.
yeah.
Uh, I think the biggest thing is, and this is executive communication 101. So executives tend to be very self-assured people. And like you believe in what you're doing, you know it's the right thing, and you're just going to go and do it. And sometimes you just break through walls and to do this thing. And sometimes that works, and other times you end up creating enemies along the way, not because they don't agree with what you're doing, but they don't know why you're doing it or why you're doing it differently than this thing that worked previously. And in successful companies, that the most challenging place to be an executive is at a successful company because the company's successful and they were successful before you arrived. And the reason you're hired is because CEOs, CFOs, CTOs, whoever boards understand that what got you here today is probably not going to get you to where you're going in the future, right? To get to your first 10 million, it's a different playbook to get to 25 million, different playbook to get to 100 million. So you have to make changes, and yet you are implementing those changes in an organization that feels like we're already successful. Why do we need to change? And there are undoubtedly things that just keep doing more of it because those are working, and there are places that you're going to change that need to change. And I think an ICP motion, if that's new to the organization, is going to sound a lot without proper communication, is going to sound a lot like you're stupid. I know who we should be selling to, and we're just going to go after these accounts. So we're not going to spend our time doing those other things. And so over communication is, I think, the key. And that's one of the things that I really focused on at Unleash is bringing people into the process early, having them understand why we're doing it. When we're not doing something, right? Why is that a non-goal? And I love this concept of non-goals versus just, things we're not going to do, because it's like, the startups are just littered with good ideas. Um, and there are just too many of them. You can't do everything at once. So you have to prioritize. And so sometimes it's okay to say, it's oftentimes okay to say, we're not going to prioritize this to this quarter, this year, because we have to do these other things. It doesn't mean it's not a good idea that we won't ever do it. We're just not going to do it today. Um, um, and then the other piece would be reiterating the success of the program, just a little bit of, internal marketing. I'm guilty as someone who is responsible for the kind of the external um, kind of view of the market of my company. Sometimes I don't do as good a job of internally marketing, either myself or my team or the success that we're driving, and that's just a really bad idea. It's not about like me. It's more about you know as heads of departments, right, we command really large portions of the overall budget of our companies. That's a
Mhm.
lot of responsibility. That's a lot of burn that's happening every month, every quarter, every year because of our teams. And like eventually if you do it wrong, you could be responsible for, laying off people. And like I know a lot of us have been through that over the last couple of years as kind of the market's changed. That's a lot of responsibility. And so it's really, really important to when you're making investments, to have people understand why you're making them, and then how's it going, right? Are we seeing, is our hypothesis right? Are we seeing an increase in whatever KPIs we thought we would? If we're not, what are we doing about it? That communication, both the good, the bad, and the ugly, is really, really important. It creates trust because if you're only ever kind of celebrating your victories, then people just don't buy it. So being transparent about what's working, what's not working, is also really important. And yeah, and I've really tried to focus on both of those things in the second iteration of implementing close factor and more broadly an ICP based motion.
Amazing. I loved what you said about non-goals. That's an important concept to embrace in particularly at your stage startups, which is, these are goals, but then these are non-goals, so don't worry if we don't achieve them. And I also loved your idea of reiterating success. It sometimes feels uncomfortable because no one wants to be going around beating their chest all the time, but I'm glad you're bringing a very thoughtful approach here so that you're communicating the why we're doing something all the time, and that builds trust, and everybody appreciates transparency.
Yeah.
Switching topics, I know we're almost at time and we will have some time for questions, but one of the things that I heard before the webinar is, you personally, how, one question that people would have for you is how do you maximize your impact as a CMO? Would love some thoughts on that because at the end of the day, we are all people. You're doing a job that is a very important job. It as you said commands a lot of the budget of of your company. How do you maximize your impact?
Yeah, great question. I think at the expense of being reductive, um, I think if you want to maximize the impact, then it's really about driving revenue. And and that's like you're a brand person or you're a, you're a you go to market kind of demand gen or you come from a product marketing background. Like there are lots of to you're kind of those are kind of the three paths into CMO. And there are more, but the three common ones. Demand gen, product marketing, kind of like brand. Sometimes you get a sales leader that transitions over to CMO. So everybody comes with their own um, kind of particular skill set, superpower, if you will. But at the end of the day, you have to drive top line revenue, and you have to do all of those things. And the best way that I've seen to maximize impact and really have a seat at the revenue table is by growing pipeline as fast as possible. And that ICP based marketing is just the best way to do that. It's just I haven't found a better way to grow revenue in, and this is maybe caveated with my own background, which tends to be on enterprise sales led software. I think ICP motion also makes a ton of sense from a PLG style company, but most of my experience is coming from kind of sales led enterprise software is adapting that motion. It's the most efficient way to spend resources. It's the most efficient way to drive pipeline. Um, and it's the clearest way to demonstrate that your actions are contributing to the outcomes that the company really cares about at the highest levels, kind of revenue and other types of board objectives. Um, So focus on how you can do that. And there are lots of different ways to do it. But I think if you think about yourself as a revenue driver, right? It's there's the chief revenue officer. That term gets used a lot as well nowadays. But at the end of the day, marketing is all about driving revenue as well. It's in a different way. It's getting the sales team the at bats. But like you are unquestionably in a revenue facing role. Once you understand that, then figuring out the shortest way to revenue. And in my experience, ICP has been the way to do it.
That's an awesome answer, Michael. I have to say that there's lots of things I learned in today's webinar, and not just about marketing or ICP based sales and marketing alignment, but also leadership lessons. I think the over communication, the ruthless prioritization of goals applies equally, not just to you as CMO, but also to CEOs everywhere, which is, make sure that you're focused on the outcomes and you're looking at the most efficient way to get there and driving your teams in that direction, both with empathy as well as with constant communication and reiteration of success. Those are important lessons for everyone to learn. I want to thank you so much for the time that you're spending both with us at Close Factor, with the audience overall, and wish you all the best for the board meeting, which clearly you're not very worried about. Thank you again for joining us on this webinar and sharing your wisdom with all our prospects.
Yeah, my pleasure.